Hey folks, my name's Pete Lewis. This is Claire Church. We're owners of the Muse Performance Space in Lafayette. We're in quarantine right now, so we're not having any events, but hopefully soon we will. We have our fingers crossed. So we've been reaching out to different musicians in the area, seeing how they're doing and kind of catching up. And this morning we have Bob Montgomery, who's been a friend of ours for a long time. And as so many of you know, Bob has been integral part in the Denver jazz scene and performances and in education. And so we're going to get to find out about Bob, what got him started playing, all the things he's doing and has done. So Bob, welcome this morning.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah.
I think I've watched most of them that you've done so far. So
really? That makes one person.
Really fascinating to hear everybody and hear their stories. I really enjoyed that.
We have learned so much about the people we've played with or haven't played with, and just some great stories, things you would never know just playing with people on gigs.
Right.
So it's been a really great experience. I'm not sure how long we'll continue it, but it's been great, and we're glad that you're here. So Bob, let me start out with just asking you, what got you into playing trumpet and jazz as a young person?
Well, I grew up in Garden City, Kansas, western Kansas, which is a farming community basically, and so most of my interests in high school were I led 3 years in football and track. I loved that. I loved playing in the band and the orchestra, but I had not played jazz. I had played mostly just the concert music and whatnot. And one day I was walking downtown in Garden City, and I went by Garnand Furniture Company, and they sold phonographs and records. And as I walked by, I heard this thing, and it ended up it was Louis Armstrong. And I thought, what is that? Wow. And so that was the start. Between he and Roy Eldridge, those are the two guys that I really got to listen to. And in western Kansas, there weren't any jazz players there, but there was one guy at one of the music stores who had played, and he told me about Moonglow with Martin, WWL New Orleans. And Moonglow with the Martin went from midnight till 2 every night, and he was a typical jazz DJ. I mean, would tell you the name of the record, the band, tell you who's on the band, who's soloing. I mean, you just got all that information and he'd play. So then I could go down to the record store and tell them, order this for me. And they'd say, well, who's that? And I said, don't worry about it, just order it. So mostly just from originally the small ones, just like that.
Yeah.
33 1/3 or whatever it was.
No, those were probably 45s.
45s. It was 45s. I bought a little 45 record player, and so I would listen to that. And so, but most nights I would listen to Moonglow with Martin. Folks didn't know I was up that late, but but I mean, I just learned to really love the music, and I think it started out. The theme was called Relaxin'. It was a tune written by Jimmy Gwynn, and it was based on in a mellow tone. But the melody was
oh yeah,
and I just loved that. And as a matter of fact, Al Herman had listened to that a few years ago. We were on a gig, and I said, "Do you know Relaxin'?" And he said, "Oh yeah, I used to listen to that."
oh really?
That's great.
So we started playing that tune a lot. But that's where I got interested, Mm-hmm. And then I got a job with a little dance band there, Marguerite Brown and her orchestra, and I was getting paid to play. I was on top of it. I was like, wow, that's great. Later on, years later, I discovered that was a really terrible band. But at the time, you know, they were paying me to play,
Sure.
and unfortunately, they taught me to solo incorrectly. They said, "Well, you just stand up and play until you're tired, then sit down." And he said nothing about chord changes or anything like that. So I went to school at DU my first 2 years, and that was a rude awakening because I was there with a lot of good musicians from Denver who understood all of that. The first jam session I went to, I was playing like I had with Marguerite, and everybody saying, "What are you doing?" And that's when I discovered that there were chord changes, you know, and I actually spent a lot of time in 5 points during that time, you know, and that's why I had to leave DU and go someplace else so I could get a degree, because I was flunking out of everything, spending all my time down there listening or going to jam sessions. And so there was a great trumpet teacher in Kansas, in Lindsborg, Kansas, Bethany College. And so I went there and studied with him and graduated and got my degree, teaching degree. And I taught for a couple of years there in a little tiny town called Roxbury, Kansas, which is the school I had taught in. From kindergarten through high school, I had 100 kids.
Oh my.
I had 26 kids in my concert band. But it was my first gig, you know. So I worked with that. And that's where I learned to teach. I really learned to teach there. It was like, and I know I had a couple of guys that were giving me fits. And I kept thinking, well, I can't throw them out because I've only got 26 kids now. And one day I was going to school and I thought, I could have had 24 kids and I'd still come and taken the job. So,
You know, 26% of the student population, it would be a really coveted percentage for most band directors. So,
yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And their parents all really supported them. So those two kids went by the way, and within a week they came back. But they came back under my rules, you know. And so then it was fun from that point on. And then went to get a master's, went to Michigan State because Gene Hall was moving there from North Texas. And he was going to be the jazz director. And I really wanted to study with him. So I went to Michigan State and kind of find out a whole bunch of people wanted to be there to study with him. And most of the guys in the band had been on the road.
wow.
The lead trumpet player had been with Kenton, second trumpet with Tommy Dorsey. I mean, it was like Whit Seidner was there playing lead alto, who went on to be ahead of the thing at Miami. So it was a great band.
You
And
never
so-
told, I never
Yeah.
knew this about you all the years we've known each other. I never knew that you went to Michigan State or any of that.
Yeah, I did. And as a matter of fact, we won the Notre Dame Jazz Festival that year, and which really made the guys from North Texas angry. But Gene Hall had looked who the judges were, and so he chose right down the road, you
Yeah.
know, big band jazz stuff, but good stuff. And some of it he had written himself. And so we won that. So consequently, we all had scholarships to the First Stand Kenton camp. And that's where I first started studying with Johnny Richards.
Oh.
He was there. He was rehearsing the Kenton band in the afternoons for that first album they did, Adventures in Time or something. I think, or maybe it was more of a Latin thing, something fire. Maybe. Anyway, so I got to study with Johnny Richards, and I had written some big band charts, and so I took those in for my first lesson. And he sat there in the table and he went through it, all three, and he handed them back to me and he says, "This is all written in concert key, and you didn't write a bass part. You just had chord changes." See, that was the end of my first lesson. And I was just devastated. So I went home that night and I rewrote all the scores in the actual pitches for the instruments.
Wow.
And I wrote a bass line where there was we had the head. And once we got to the solos, it's just chords like, always. And he looked at that and he said, okay. And that's where it started.
That's awesome.
And so after my lesson was when he went to work with the Kenton band. So whatever I had written, the very first chart was Autumn in New York. And so he took that chart, and the Kenton band was the first band to play it.
Wow.
And I heard that, and I figured out anything that wasn't right there was the way I wrote it. It had nothing to do with the band,
Yeah.
So, but it was a great, great learning experience. Really wonderful. And I actually continued to write a lot of big band stuff for my high school bands, especially. When my first teaching job after that was in Evergreen at elementary school. While I'd been in Michigan State, I taught 1 year at junior high, Patton Gill Junior High, and I discovered I can't do that. I could not relate to those kids. It was like impossible. And so then my second year, I taught at the Michigan School for the Blind, and that was really fun. That was really a challenge. So when I started teaching in Evergreen at the grade school, I had a good-sized orchestra when I started, and a concert band.
In elementary school? What, was sixth graders?
Yeah, fifth and sixth graders.
Okay.
Yeah, and it just so happened the student who was the first violin player was one of the most popular kids in school, and so it was cool to be in the orchestra. It was easy to recruit for that, and he was there for a couple of years, and then the next one came in. Happened to be a kid who loved playing the violin, loved music, but he loved to fight, and he loved taking his violin to get on the bus, and he'd always get in a fight there waiting for the bus. With some kids that started making fun of him, he loved it. And so there, for another couple of years, it was easy to recruit. So, and plus, I had a fifth grade composition class and a sixth grade composition class.
Wow.
And basically, I just used jazz theory, building off of one scale, and how to use those chords, and so they could do it in any key. And by the time they were in the sixth grade composition class, they were getting pretty good. So they would write something, and then I'd sit down with them, and I'd say, okay, how do you want this played by either the band or the orchestra? And so they might say, well, I'd like to have you have the melody here, and then have the trombones come in on this, and then play some harmony. But they would just tell me everything they wanted in that. So I would go home and do a score, because they couldn't do that. I mean, that was beyond them, because it had to be in the proper keys and everything for everybody. So I would do a score for them, and then I would give it to them, and they would copy all the parts, and then they would rehearse the band. It was good.
Yeah.
And so in Evergreen, at that little Wilmot Elementary, our concerts were packed because everybody wanted to come hear that, And also, I taught a beginning class. We didn't use a book. We did everything by ear. That way, they could start out learning to get a good sound on their instrument and play a few notes, and then we started playing real simple tunes. And it wasn't too long before they could play pretty well, and they actually sounded pretty good. Couldn't read music yet, but that didn't matter. And my biggest concern when I started doing that was Christmas concert. And I discovered that anything they could sing, they could play. So Christmas concerts was great. It was easy, And we had packed audiences there, not just parents. A lot of people came to hear that because the kids conducted their own pieces. So
when did you it seems like you were teaching in Denver at some point, or did you hang in Evergreen for a while?
Well, I lived there 13 years.
Oh,
you know. But I taught every day, and I was playing 6 nights a week.
yeah, yeah, that's hard.
So,
Yeah.
but then I went from there to Alameda High School.
Oh,
I think I was at Alameda for maybe 4 years, and got a great band going. You know, with the people in the first year there, like Bob Gillis was in the band, and a bunch of kids like that who really played pretty well, you know. And so we developed a really good band. And then at one point, the principal from Evergreen called me, and he said, "Would you move up to Evergreen?" Well, the high school was only 2 blocks from my house.
nice.
Okay, cool. You know, so I went up there. The difference was at Alameda, the kids were living in a fairly large city, and they had a lot of access to music. But in Evergreen, at that time, it was a tiny town. We only had one stoplight in the town, you know, so it was very small. But developed a really good band. It was like really fun. And actually, it started out, it wasn't so great for the first 2 or 3 weeks. And then, well, I probably should not admit this, but I got very angry at all the kids. And I stopped and stopped them, and we just stood there for a minute. And I told them how I'd had it up to here with kids who didn't want to work. They weren't interested. I said, so unfortunately, I used some profanity at the same time. It caught their eye, you know, they listened. And I said, so I'm just going to go down and hang out in the teacher's lounge. You guys do whatever you want. I don't care. I'm not going to work with you. It went on for 3 days. And one of the kids comes and said, the band wants to talk to you. So at that point, everything changed. And it got to the point where the kids would rehearse themselves. They could. They could all do that because every time we talked about phrases, I would either play them for them or I would sing them to them. And they got used to that. Because, I mean, you guys are musicians, you know, how are you going to explain a phrase to young students?
Yeah, I think it's really that whole vocalization thing is like what teaches kids to play phrasing. And
Yeah,
if you have trouble vocalizing it, I find your bands have trouble playing it.
yeah. And so with the band, it went really well. And it was a small orchestra at that time because in the time I'd gone to Alameda, the people weren't really teaching strings that well, so had only had a few. But developed a good band. And they learned in rehearsals that they pretty much were to run the rehearsals because I figured we want them when they go out to play to be able to make musical decisions. Well, if they never had to make one, if they were always just told what to do, that's not going to help, you know. So I would let the lead players decide how things were going to be played, you know. And if there was something that I thought ought to go another way, I would suggest it to them, but then it was up to them whether they did it or not. You know? Yeah. And so we did only sight reading the first year. And if they couldn't sight read the tune, the chart, we weren't going to work on it because then we couldn't work on music, you know. If they had to worry about fingerings and all of that, the music wasn't going to happen. So we'd play easy charts, and once they could play that, if I would find one that really fit the band, I thought, boy, the band really sounds good on that, you know. I would have them pass it in, and the next day I would call it again. And say, well, we passed that in. I said, I know, but you remember enough of it. You know, you can do it, and you might not play everything exactly the way it was on the music, but as long as you play together, and as long as every note you do play fits the rhythm section, fine, I don't care. And so they became very good.
So, Bob, you had a recording of Clark Terry playing with your band. Did you want to do that?
In 1975, Clark was one of the headliners at the Wichita Jazz Festival, and he told the person who was running the festival. Maxine Adams was her name. And he said, I would like for the Evergreen High School band to back me up. And she said, really? And he said, yeah, because he had played with us. At that point, he had played with us 2 or 3 times, you know. And so I wrote a suite for him, and we played that suite on the concert. And there were people in there like Pete Olstad was in the band, and Mark Patterson was in the band. And I mean, there were other kids that played almost as well as they did. And a lot of those kids went on to make music their career, you know. But, so I had written that, and I had heard Diane Reeves when she was in high school. And I asked her, you know, if she was singing with her band. And she said, not much. You know, they didn't really have much of it. So I said, well, if you would come up to Evergreen and rehearse with us, I would write charts for you. So I did. One of them was Land of Make Believe. And I had played on Chuck Mangiovi's band, because Lou Soloff was the lead player, and he got me on the band. And it used to be when I would come back from Europe, I would stay with Lou in his apartment in New York. So we had become very good friends.
Uh-oh, are we frozen?
So I wrote that chart, and so the band played. They were actually paid to go play, you know. So I'm going to play, I'll do something here. I'll just do the third movement of this because it's too long for that. So I'll just start with the third movement and listen to that. But it is primo Clark Terry. This is Clark Terry, and it's just amazing. This is actually the end of the second movement. Remember in 1975, Evergreen was a little tiny town.
Yeah.
We only had one stoplight in the town. Here's the third movement. Wichita Jazz Festival. Only 5,000 or 6,000 people in the audience. There's Clark. The balance is not great because they only had one microphone out in the middle, and it was just there recording the whole thing. So this was not good recording for music. Clark loved playing in this band. And then they play him off for this next one.
We should probably cut to the interview, honestly. Good. Yeah, man.
Bob, you should be super proud of that band.
Yeah, they sound
Holy
great.
smokes.
The rhythm section's killing it. I mean, saxes too. They also play very well in tune for a high school band, which is usually the sticking point is like it gets good, but it hardly ever gets past good,
Yeah, and that was still a problem, even at the level they were playing at.
Yeah.
But it's something that we worked at during all the rehearsals.
Well, let's go into the future a little bit. And so you kept teaching and performing just all the time, right? So like getting just a few hours of sleep. You're performing, you're writing, you're starting a tour,
Having kids.
having a family, um, and so, and then when did you kind of start doing your own projects and your own recording? And were those mostly with Al Herman?
No,
Oh, okay.
Al and I didn't meet until in the 90s.
Oh, okay.
This was still in the 70s, 75. And I was traveling and doing a lot of playing with high school bands and college bands and as a soloist and do clinics and master classes and whatnot. And I was very fortunate at the high school I was at. The principal knew that if I had a rehearsal for a show in the afternoon, because I played a lot of shows at that time and did a lot of recording of jingles and stuff that we did too at that time, mostly for radio. But they knew that they needed to let me go for that time. And so, and they also knew they had to have a substitute there for legal reasons. But I told them, do not allow them to attempt to teach, because the kids will take care of it. And I had more phone calls from the subs the next day saying, how do you get them to do that? I said, well, it's just the way we always did it, you know, so they know what to do. So that was good.
That's great.
And but actually, I had a pretty good career doing that and also publishing my charts. I could write charts for the high school bands or college bands and make them easy to play but sound good. Okay? And I want to play for you just one chart by one of the bands I played with. There was a band in North Dakota, Bismarck, North Dakota. It was the University of Mary, very small school. But the band director there was just an amazing teacher. Scott Prebus was his name. And he had these bands just playing so well. And I had soloed with them several different times. And he was about to retire and he wanted to do a recording. So he hired me to come and solo with the band, and they played mostly my charts. But I just thought the band was so good. And at that time, I could really play, you know. I mean, the last 20 years here has not even been close to what I was able to do at one time. But, you know, after a while, I guess it goes that way. But here's a tune I wrote for them that I would like to play for you. Just one tune, and this is Joy Spring.
Nice.
Woo!
Nice chart.
I really enjoyed writing that chart because I loved Clifford Brown anyway. So
Yeah.
So, Bob, I see you have Summer Jazz. Is that the Telluride?
oh no,
Oh,
this is one Jamie Abersol just sent me.
okay. It wasn't seen. But can you tell us a little bit about how the Telluride Jazz Festival got going in your camp?
Oh, yeah, the festival had been going for several years, and in 1994, I had played it a few times with my groups back then. I think somewhere I've got a photograph of Pete Olstead and I playing. Paul Warburton was on bass, Nat Yarbrough on drums, and Ellen Rucker on piano. And they came to me and they said, "We're not very happy with the jazz education thing that we have going. Would you be interested in taking that over?" And I told them, "Well, yeah, I guess I would." But I said, I won't do it in the same way you're doing it, where you just get a bunch of kids together and play, and and there's no point in it really. So I said, I've been thinking about something for a couple of years now that I would really like to do, and so I would like to do just an all-star program where we take auditions, and usually out of maybe 300 or 400 auditions, I'd pick a rhythm section and 3, 4 kids on the front line, either horn players or vocalists or whatever. Okay? So we're talking about 8 kids probably. Sometimes it'd go to 10, sometimes it'd be 6, but most of the time it was around 8. And so I wanted to take those kids and bring them to Telluride for a week and have them write the music. And then we would like to play the opening concert on the Telluride Jazz Festival. And fortunately, they had a little trepidation, but they finally said, "Oh, okay, well, let's try it for a year." So I got Yamaha to underwrite that program for 5 years. And it started out, actually, Josh Quinn was in the very first one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and we had like Marshall Gilks was in that, a great trombone player. He just recently recorded, I think, with the WDR band, and he's a mainstay in New York. And actually, a good story, when he was in high school, of course, all the kids I had for the Telluride All-Stars were high school kids. They were all teenagers. And so he and Sam Robinson, the trumpet player, who's now in Chicago playing, they said, "Could we do giant steps?" And I said, "No, I don't want to do that. It's big flag raver. Everybody plays it too fast, and I don't want to just to feature a few people. They said, "Well, if we do it in a different way, would you consider it?" I said, "Okay." So the next morning they came in to play it for me, and they did maybe 4, 5, 6 choruses of Sam soloing on trumpet and trombone playing the changes with multiphonics.
Cool.
He was in high school,
That's cool.
Marshall Gilks. And I thought, yes, you could do that. I want everybody to hear that. That was really something. So, but we had a lot of great players come down. One of the kids, a piano player, actually he played violin the first 2 years he was in the All-Stars. Really fine jazz violinist. And at the end of the second year, he said, "Could I audition on piano next year?" I said, "Sure, go ahead." So he did, and he made it. And during the concert, Paquito de Rivera was backstage listening to the band, and he hired him coming off the stage to be his piano player.
Wow.
Well, it's like when Colin Stranahan was in the band. Larry Coryell heard him and hired him. One of the piano players, Will Bonas, was 17 when he was an all-star, and 2 months after he left us, he went with Maynard Ferguson for 2 years. So those are the kinds of musicians we were getting. you know. They didn't realize they all played better than I did. But I always had, you know, ways of talking to them about things and talking about the business and attitudes and, you know, the things you want to really think about when you present music. Shouldn't be about ego, you know. And they were great. Grace Kelly was one of them. You've probably seen her on a lot of television. And she turned 16 while she was there.
Cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but a lot of great players. And even recently, some of the mainstays in the scene in Denver, like Annie Booth and Patrick McDevitt and Alejandro Castaño, Alex Heffron, Anisha Rush. I mean, just a whole bunch of those kids had been all-stars at one time. And there's a whole bunch more that I haven't even mentioned yet, but we can sit here all day naming names, you know. There's no point in that.
Yeah.
So
We should probably, we're getting close to an hour here, so we should probably wrap up pretty soon.
Well, I just want to say, and before we ask you a concluding question, and sorry to interrupt
It's okay, go ahead.
Congratulations on just being such an influential person in the Denver scene and educating all these fine musicians. I mean, everybody is thankful for that, and you should feel real proud of that. You know, it's just
Yeah,
like,
that's a big
holy
deal.
smokes, Bob, that is amazing. You know what you've done, and for the locally and nationally too, because there's so many people all over the place. So that's just,
I've been very fortunate.
yeah,
Very, very.
yeah. Claire, did you have something?
No, we've just been asking people, you know, how you think. Well, first of all, if you have any words of wisdom or encouragement for people in these times, because things are weird, and if you think, you know, things are going to change as a result, or how you think things are going to move on, and what you got to tell people.
I think they'll move on, but I think they're going to be different. I don't know how, but we have too many great players here right now. I mean, the jazz scene in Denver and this section of Colorado is just powerful.
Yeah.
And I've told several of them that it reminded me of New York in the 30s and 40s. All our heroes, when you look at pictures of them, when they were doing that, they were all in their 20s. And I said, you guys are doing the same thing here. It's like, wow, you know, just amazing musicianship. You listen to someone play, you think, how could they learn that, you know? But mostly what I talk to them about is like playing as themselves. Said, what, you know, everybody else is taken.
Yeah.
So you might as well play like you want to play, you know?
Yeah.
Great.
And there's a responsibility to the music. And you have to really take care of that responsibility to the music and to the other musicians around you. And to me, that's what's important about this music, you know, and that's how we can share it with each other. And boy, just watching these young players, it's amazing what they're doing. And so I think that's important. And if they do that, become great players and to be unique. For the first time in years, there was a whole period of time during the 80s and 90s when everybody sounded alike. All the saxophones sounded alike. And the trumpet player, everybody sounded like whoever was popular at the moment. And now in the scene we have here, I don't hear that. I can walk into a club and I know who that is playing before I've ever seen them.
Yeah.
It's like they all have their own unique voice.
Yeah.
I mean, you hear Anisha Rush play, you know who that is, you know? If you hear, like Gisbert play, or Miles Lujan, or any of them, you know, Rico Jones, every one of them have their voice, and they've really built on that. That's what makes it so spectacular. I think music is in a good shape in this area, you know, we really are.
Yeah.
And those kids all support each other too. I don't see any backbiting or in a knife in the back or any. I don't see any of that in the scene here in Denver.
I've said that before on these interviews that I think this is a very warm, supportive music scene to be involved in, having been in several others, you know.
Right.
So we appreciate that.
So it's
Well,
marvelous to see it.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And we'll get this posted in the next few days, Bob.
Good. I can't believe we did an hour, 20 minutes.
Hey, we could go more and more, but yeah. So
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I love the way you guys play and what you've meant. And, you know, like Claire, I still remember some of those Chet Baker, Jerry Mulligan things that we did together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I miss that.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you. And thank
Bye.
you all.
Bye-bye.